All right, so talking to you today about translating physical events into virtual events. And when I was asked to consider this question, two things that kept coming up to me were who, what, where, and why, and what to display and what do I want to say. And I think those questions will help you formulate how you want to take your event online. I'm going to dive into this a little bit more in depth, but first of all, I want to talk to you about bringing along your audiences. If you have always had physical events, and this is your first foray into the virtual sphere, you're going to need to make sure your audience understands how your event is going to be different and what to expect from the event. And this can include some very practical things like how to access the event, what's the URL, do they need to register or log in, costings, as well as troubleshooting, which can be as simple as I forgot my password to log in, to I have a browser that I haven't updated in 4 years and now I can't access the website. So there's quite a scope there, and just be prepared to answer those questions. The other thing that I cannot impart the importance of is high quality images. So many of the platforms that you are likely to be engaging with and using are visual. So if you can have really good high quality images, it's going to make your exhibition or event much easier and more enjoyable to engage with. And when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and hire a photographer, particularly if that is beyond your means, but it does mean that you might want to upgrade your skills taking pictures on your phone. And that can be as simple as Googling, how to take really good quality images on my smartphone. And that will help you a lot. Okay, so what does a digital event look like? In my experience, website and resources are generally more static and events are a little bit more engaging. And there may be the option to have a bit of back and forth with other people who are engaging in the event, or maybe just the hosts themselves. What you want to feature and what you want to say, I think will be a huge step in determining what platform you want to use. And during SALA this year, that was one of the biggest questions we kept getting. What platform should I use? I would say have a good think about the event that you want to host and make maybe a list of dot points about what makes that event unique or special or what's really important. And once you have that list, make another list of different websites that you're interested in using to host that event. Once you have that list, go to those websites and really mindfully think about how you navigate those spaces. So Instagram, I think, is a really good example of this, because I know when I'm on Instagram and if I'm looking at someone's specific account, if I can't scroll 3 to 5 times, then I don't feel like there's enough content there for me. So if you don't feel like you have enough content to fill that space, then maybe that platform's not for you. Another thing to consider is your demographic, which I'll go into in a little bit more depth, but what are they likely to engage with? Are they very tech savvy? Are they not? And how can you work with that? This little picture here on the phone is actually a virtual reality space by artist Jess Taylor. And that was part of MOD, an exhibition they had in 2019. So that might be another thing to consider as well. If you have a display, exhibit or program that you don't think has gotten enough airtime that's perfect for the digital space, maybe that's something that you want to push. All right, so now we're going to get into a few examples that worked really well for SALA this year and SALA participants. So this here is a Google Slides art gallery, and Google Slides is kind of like a PowerPoint you can access through the internet. So the background of the PowerPoint is this art gallery space, and then you can slot in the images, and that makes up your art gallery. In this particular gallery, you can click on each of the images and the image comes up on one side, and on the other side you have a bit of text relating to that image. You can navigate the gallery by moving between different rooms, and that I think was a really good option for people who are looking to have a traditional exhibiting experience in an online platform. It is quite static because it is a PowerPoint. But if you're looking for something that is potentially a little bit more engaging, Art Steps is a very similar program in the sense that it's a gallery space, you slot in your images, but it's a bit more VR because you use your mouse or your arrow keys to actually walk around the gallery space, and then you can stand in front of a work and examine it a bit more closely. So both of those are really good options. It just depends on what you're comfortable using and what you think will be most engaging to your audience. I wanted to show you a few examples from SALA Festival itself of what worked really well and what didn't. So on the left here, we have a little screenshot of our SALA Instagram. This year, we wanted to have a little bit more engagement there and a few more fun things. So we created the Which SALA 2020 Exhibition Are You filter. This didn't work as well for us as we would have liked. The demographic in the office is quite young, you know, mid-20s to mid-30s, and the demographic of SALA Festival is older than that. And while we thought filters were really ubiquitous and everybody knew how to use them, we soon found out that our actual core demographic didn't know how to use them. And so there was lots of troubleshooting in the comments and the message sections to get that working. We made videos about how to use the filters, which people could and couldn't find. They didn't know how to work those sorts of functions on Instagram. And I think the general question that we asked was not perfect for sharing a filter. So the younger demographic that did engage with this, it wasn't something that they could really share very well with their friends because it wasn't funny or a fun like filter that changed your hair different colors. It was really about them very personally and what exhibition they are and they should go to. On the flip side, we have the SALA Festival podcast, and you might recognise Britt there in one of the pictures. This actually replaced our SALA forum. The forum is a physical event that we've held for the past 4 to 6 years, and it's a group of panel discussions about different arts topics or different arts practices. And it's a full day, it's 4 talks, and we would maybe get 40 people there, and we thought that was really good, fantastic numbers. But because it is quite a long day, by the time we got to the last talk, we'd maybe have 20 people in the room because people were just worn out. So when we looked at that event, we realized the audio is really the most important thing, and that made a beautiful translation to the online podcast platform. When we looked at the downloads for the podcast, we were finding that 100 people had been listening to our podcast, which is such a jump from the 40 people that we thought, oh, this is a fantastic event. So in the future, I don't think that we're going to bring back the forum, but I think that we are going to continue with podcasts. So that might be something to consider. Maybe the way that you're doing things now isn't even the best way. Maybe a virtual option is better. You may be interested in doing a pre-recorded video, particularly if you have an exhibition that is physically installed in a space. And I think that the Adelaide Central School of Art has done a really great job of that. One thing I think that they really considered is how you experience an exhibition physically. So we can see in the top left-hand corner, they've got an establishing shot of the gallery. Underneath that, shots of individual artworks with the artist's name and the title of the work. And then there was narration over the top of this video from the curator, and you can see the details of each of the artworks, which really enforced what he was saying. This video is still available on the Adelaide Central School of Art website, so if you're interested in going and seeing that, you still can. Talks and tours. So one of the things that worked particularly well for people during SALA was having and conducting talks via Zoom or other live platforms. This one here was done by the Art Gallery of South Australia, and I wanted to show it to you because if podcasts and things of that nature feel a little bit beyond you, then Zoom might be a really wonderful tool for you to use. We're all on Zoom now, and most people I think are pretty au fait with the platform. I think one thing that they did really well was Lisa Slade was the facilitator for this event, and she cued each person in So it was really clear when people were meant to speak and when they weren't, and there wasn't people fighting to answer questions or have their say. So I think that worked really well. And the Art Gallery of South Australia has done a number of virtual events, this one included. So if you want to have a look at their website, that's still available for you. And I thought it was a really interesting talk, so I think you should have a look. Here are some platforms to consider. I won't spend too long on this slide because I think I've covered the main ones that were particularly popular for SALA participants this year. But some advantages to taking your physical exhibition or event online is the potential to reach bigger audiences. Beyond the SALA podcast, we had an exhibition in Narracourt who were announcing a few winners to their competition, and they said that they had 600 people tune into their Facebook Live, which is many, many more people than they would ever have been able to fit into the gallery. And some of those people were even tuning in from France to watch their grandpa collect an award, which they never would have been able to come to Australia for particularly that event in other years. You might have lower costs if you don't have to hire materials or install an exhibition or event physically. So that's always good. If you have a small team, generally, if you are having an open access event, there are small teams. You may not have as many staff or volunteers needed to sit a gallery space. And you also have a greater opportunity for accessibility. Now, I say greater opportunity because just because something is online doesn't necessarily mean it is accessible. There are lots of things to consider with accessibility, including things like closed captioning, making sure your text and font are user-friendly, that text doesn't overlap with images, and many, many more things. So if you're looking to have a really accessible and inclusive online event, I would recommend that you get in touch with someone like Access to Arts, who can give you a whole bunch of resources on how to make that happen in the best possible way. All right, tips and tricks. This is really dependent, I think, on what platform you choose to use, but for some general ones, for live events, have a support person who's managing the comments, like wonderful Liz. It is quite a lot to ask the person who is presenting to also be reading comments, responding to them, and articulating them. If you're going to have comment and chat windows, which are wonderful ways for audiences to engage and create a sense of community, be prepared to monitor these sections, not only for things like troubleshooting and answering questions, but just to make sure that everybody is behaving in a respectful manner. If donations are super important to you, make sure your donation link is accessible and intuitive to use, and it's front and center so people don't have to go looking for it. If you need to take tickets and your website potentially doesn't facilitate that, Eventsy might be a way of helping you book and process ticket purchasing. And Zoom also offers a pay to join function on webinars. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head if that is only for paid Zoom account holders or for the free account holders as well, but they may be some things that you want to consider. So I think that's all from me, and I am more than happy to answer questions in just a little bit.
All right, here we go. So I will pick up on some of the things that Christina's already said and then expand on a few bits and pieces as well. So in my role as the Public Programs Coordinator for the History Trust, I wear many hats, but mainly supporting the History Festival team and Centre of Democracy team, but also my role revolves around planning and managing events. And obviously before COVID, that was in-person physical events. Pre-COVID or post-COVID, I should say, we've completely done a 180 and had to learn how to go online with our events quite quickly. So we have, and we've learned a little bit along the way. So for 2021 History Festival, worst case scenario, if we do have to cancel or postpone it again, we don't have to cancel our events altogether. We've got that online platform. So now is a really great time to innovate, be brave, and to learn how to take your events online. There we go. So I'm sure you all kind of know what an online event is. Just a bit of a fun fact that virtual events have been around since the very early 1990s, and the world's first live stream was actually footage of a coffee maker mid-drip. And as fascinating as that was, it actually got millions of views. But now, these days, we have virtual tours of museums, and we can even have Q&As with astronauts in space. It's pretty amazing what we can do now. And so the benefit of online events is that they allow you to host from the comfort of your home or your office, using only a laptop, a mobile or a tablet, and the wonders of the internet. So as Christina mentioned, some of the main advantages of online events, it's definitely time and convenience. So people, especially for attendees, they can attend anytime from anywhere in the world and still have that personalised experience that they would expect from a physical event, as well as consume the content in their own time if they can't make the live session. For our Talking History events, even though we don't necessarily have as many people as we sometimes did in person, we've noticed that for each event, we've actually had people tuning in from interstate and even overseas. I think our last presentation, we had someone from Fiji, which was absolutely amazing and which we couldn't do pre-COVID. They're also extremely cost effective, as Christina was saying. You can save on venue hire costs, catering and drinks. That always took up a lot of our budget. Travel costs and even sometimes speaker costs, depending on who you're wanting to invite to speak. You don't have to worry about the weather, which is a plus in May. And of course, they're very low risk because you can't catch COVID online. So extra bonus there. Now, can any event be hosted virtually? Yes and no. It depends on a few different factors. So when moving from face-to-face to online events, you'll want to run a few tests and see what works best for you and for the event that you're thinking of. So while not every event is suited necessarily to running it online, if you're planning a talk or a book launch or a demonstration, you can easily go virtual with just a few simple tools up your sleeve. And even workshops that don't require people to have specific equipment can definitely work. However, if you're thinking big and keen to experiment, there's no limitations on the variety of events that you can host. So you can host conferences, concerts, live performances, scavenger hunts, there's the podcast, as Christina mentioned, which are a great one, tours, exhibitions and more. However, just like physical events, you do need to have a lot of planning in place for your online events too. So all the same rules basically apply for online events as with physical events. So think about your audience, think about the time of the day that you're going to be running the session, think about the date, don't forget those major dates in May like Mother's Day, etc. And what do you want to achieve from the event? Make sure you have a team to help you behind the scenes. You can even approach local businesses to sponsor your event or to do some promotion work. As Karen mentioned at the start, don't forget to do your acknowledgement of country or even invite someone from your local community, Indigenous member, to do a welcome to country. And then keep in mind if you've got speakers from across the state or even interstate, and ask them to do acknowledgement of their local country as well. It's also still worth creating a risk management plan, especially if you're doing a tour. The amount of times that you might be talking to camera, you walk backwards and you trip over. So it's just something to think about, even though we're in an online setting, think about your health and safety. Don't forget about copyright. As Christina was saying, it's important to use good quality images, but just keep in mind where you're getting those images or footage from. So even online copyright still applies. After the event, don't forget to debrief with your team, see what went well, what you could improve on. Ask your audience for feedback. Often they'll pick up on things that you perhaps didn't notice. And document your process as you go, especially if you've got any technical instructions written down. It'll come in handy next time. I actually keep my own personal checklist every time we do an event, and I have it next to me. I have a before, during and an after checklist. So things that I'd double check for Zoom, for example, are you can see the History Trust logo there where Karen's turned her video off. We've got our names correct. Liz has got our inboxes open at the moment, just keeping an eye on social media, looking for any questions that might come through from people. Often, sometimes perhaps the link won't work for someone and we need to send them another one to try and get in. Allocate someone to keep an eye on the chat, obviously, which is Liz is doing a great job of today. Thanks very much, Liz. I've also provided our MC with notes about the speakers, about the topic, and any other information that I need them to communicate. We all practice our PowerPoint presentations beforehand. We go through practice with the speakers to make sure the tech's working or the microphones are working. I had to change my headset about 10 minutes before we started because my other one wasn't working properly. And at the end of the Zoom, it's always handy to save your chat and your Q&As before you end the meeting. Some of it's saved in the back end, but the Q&A chat part especially, doesn't save automatically. So it's always good to grab a screenshot of those questions, especially if there are questions that you didn't get to. However, there's a few other things specific to online events that you should keep in mind. Not all platforms and software are equal. Some are definitely better than others, some will work better for some events than others, and some you will actually need to pay for. There's usually free versions of most of the software, but that might only get you up to a certain point, so then you might need to look at potentially purchasing some of it. If it's out of your budget, you could always approach a similar history group or organisation and see if they're willing to share the costs with you. You could also approach your local council or library. They might already have purchase licenses that you could borrow for a one-off event. If you're going to record the presentation and host it later on the website, don't forget to ask your speaker's permission if that's okay. Preferably get it in writing. If they're a researcher, for example, or they've created a film that you're showing, they might not want their presentations available for free on the internet afterwards, especially if that's how they make their living. So in that case, it might be a special one-off event that you don't record, and then make sure you need to tell your audience that as well. It's always nice to edit your recordings before you send them out to your audience or put them on YouTube, and there's plenty of free and paid video editing software that's actually really easy to use. I was a complete newbie a few weeks ago at editing the videos for the history festival, for our Talking History lectures, and there's a piece of software called Win Movie Maker, which I think is only about $30 or so, and that's so simple, even I can use it, so that's been really good. Speaking of tech, what if we're not tech savvy? But basically, if you have a laptop and a webcam, you can host or record a virtual event anywhere. Let's say you're planning to host a book talk or where the author reads from and talks about their latest release. This would be really well suited to a chat recorded with a webcam or a phone. That's very simple. You can also link up with your local school and ask the students to help. There's always tech savvy kids at school that are looking for an IT project. Approach some of the teachers and ask if they can help out. And it's also a really good way to get them interested in your local history as well. So what tech do we need? Obviously a computer, tablet, or phone. Stable internet connection is always good. If you can have a plugged in connection, that's far more stable than a Wi-Fi. You can only do what you can do with the internet. A webcam, so you can either get a built-in one which comes in with your device or an external one. And you can grab these and they just plug into your computer or tablet. And yeah, you can get them from your local tech shops like JB Hi-Fi, Officeworks, or something like that. If you do want one for May, make sure you maybe investigate ordering one soon. There has been delays with postal because they're a hot commodity at the moment. So think about that. Headset, speakers, and microphone. Mobile phone earbuds are often quite handy in a pinch, and they come with a built-in microphone these days. If you've got 2 or more people in the room, you might need a microphone that plugs into a computer. I have an example here. And that's just a normal microphone, and it's just got a little USB port. It also has one for a phone as well. A tripod. They can be really easy, really cheap, and you can pick them up really cheaply from any camera shop as well. And that can hold your camera nice and steady, so then you don't have someone sitting there with an hour with a shaky hand doing that. Obviously, any of your virtual event platforms, the Zoom, Teams, Facebook, Christina had a whole list of options she put up earlier, and mainly it's just the willingness to give it a go. If you're looking for more specialised technology, definitely go talk to your local tech supplier. For example, here in the History Trust, we have a piece of equipment called a gimbal, which is this little beast. And you basically put your phone into it, and it has a stabiliser, so as you walk around, it actually keeps your phone incredibly stable. So there's none of that wobbling, even if you're walking. So it's a fantastic little beast. So there are options like that if you're doing guided tours or things like that. All right, how do you make an online event fun and engaging? And it's a real thing. We all have Zoom fatigue. So it can be really hard to keep things lively, especially after the year that we've all had. So as Christina said, definitely consider a pre-recorded presentation. It actually can be really engaging. You can include and film a lot of content before the event, so you don't have to worry about live situations like a live stream. You can control for different factors that way. It's also a lot more relaxing for the presenters and the hosts as well. And the best thing is that the presenters, while the presentation's being played, they can jump onto the online chat, answer people's questions and engage with the audience as the presentation is happening. So that's really a great way to do something like that. You can host a virtual food or beverage tasting. Why not link up with a local producer and send out little mini packs of food or nibbles or something to people who are attending. And then, for example, if you were talking about, say, we had a talking history the other night, which was all about Ghana environment and plants and things. And the boys presenting that were talking about the different kinds of native plants that you can eat. And we had an idea to do the same thing, send out little packs of food so people can enjoy it at the same time as the lecture. Unfortunately, that didn't end up happening, but it's definitely something we're going to keep under our belt, possibly for History Festival next year. You can also offer incentives to people. You could host a raffle or have gift cards or have merchandise to give away. This encourages people to attend, but it's also a really nice way to give something back to the community and to build your online audience. Other ideas of events that you could do could be interviews, behind the scenes tours of your museum or a heritage building. That could be really nice for our Open Doors focus program. You could live stream a ride in a heritage vehicle, run a cooking or machinery demonstration, or even run a craft workshop. You could show someone how to bake the perfect scone or weave a basket. So the possibilities are endless, really. And if you decide to run a physical event, definitely look at adding those online features. So run your lecture or guided tour as normal, but get someone to live stream it as you go. That way people get the best of both worlds, and we often get a lot of feedback from History Festival attendees saying, oh, I couldn't go to that because it clashed with something else, or I can't make it that day, or I'm interstate or whatever. This is the way that you can still offer that to people in person and online as well. And so yeah, just another word about accessibility. As Christina was saying, she said reach out to Access to Arts. One of our next upcoming History Festival webinars will be by Jodie from Access to Arts. So she will speak specifically about this topic in a lot more detail. But I just wanted to touch base and mention a few things that you should think about as well. So just like in-person events, virtual events should be as accessible and inclusive as possible as well. So be upfront with people and let them know exactly what kind of access you're providing. It just makes it easier for everyone that way. Make sure you use clear language. If you're doing presentations, use large fonts and high colour contrast. Provide captions and visuals for your audio if you can. So you could potentially hire a Auslan interpreter or add captions to your recording before posting online. And also provide descriptions where possible for visuals and images. So if you've got a PowerPoint presentation, you could say, this slide has a picture of a person in a wheelchair, and there's other indications for audio and visual accessibility here. You can do it better than that, but you kind of get the idea. But just keep in mind, you can't be everything to everyone all at once, but it's really important to try, and we still definitely have a long way to go with that as well. Representation is also really important when it comes to your events. Access is also about what you program, who you invite to speak, and what your content is. So make sure your event showcases a diverse range of voices if possible. And that opens up whole new audiences, and word will spread and more people will come to your events over time. So just a few tips for presenters. Again, don't forget to arrange a host or an MC. The person should be able to speak clearly, respond to questions, introduce speakers and so on. The host should be comfortable looking straight into the camera, which is kind of tricky if it's depending on where your camera is in the screen. And needs to be confident responding to unexpected events, just like in a physical situation as well. So keep in mind that you can also have two hosts, and if they have a really good rapport, it can be really beneficial and engaging for two presenters as well. Wear something comfortable and in colours that suit you. Try to avoid heavily patterned or glittery fabrics, and if you're filming with a green screen behind you, like literally a green cloth, sort of like they do in the weather, don't wear green like me. I'm not in front of a green screen, but if you do that, you'll become a bit of a floating head if you turn your background on, so that can look a bit strange. Try not to slouch, try to make eye contact with the camera. It's useful to practice this because presenting to a virtual audience, especially in a webinar where you can't necessarily see the audience, is quite tricky, so it's fun to practice that. Use you'll get stuck in this word. Conversational language and keep going if you make a mistake, because there's a good chance you're going to be the only one that's going to notice. So just some things to remember. So just like a physical event, stay on topic and stay on time. Consider shortening the event by 15 or 30 minutes, perhaps, and try not to make it any longer than an hour, because like in a real situation, people tend to get a bit restless, and sitting and staring at a screen for a long time is quite draining. Have a plan B. Technical issues can and will happen. You're talking to the queen of technical issues, happens to me constantly, and so practice is good. And regardless of if you've tested, things will happen. So always test your technical equipment. So that's all your microphones, adjust your camera angles. At eye height is good, or slightly above looking down is the most flattering. Check your environment. So the lighting is important. Natural lighting is probably best, or from like a 45-degree angle. And make sure you have a quick look about what's in the background behind you. If you've got cats and don't want to be interrupted, they will interrupt you. So perhaps lock the cats outside. Try to avoid overhead lighting if you can. Obviously don't sit with your back to the window, because then you'll be a talking silhouette. Make sure you conduct tests with your speakers too, especially if they're doing it off-site or in their own homes. And if something comes up, then you've got time to fix it. If you're running a public event online, make sure you never share the link publicly. Our friends at Events SA got into a bit of trouble with that not long ago, because they shared it on Facebook and they actually got Zoom bombed, and they actually had to cancel their event, which is really unfortunate. So security is still really important. So make sure your attendees actually register somewhere, and then you can send the link out to them a day or so before. Always have replacement or backup equipment, check your battery levels, and make sure you have your chargers handy. And at the end of the day, the audience has got to understand, because everyone's had issues with technology at some point. Encourage engagement. It's really important to try and have an opportunity to interact with your audience. Many of us are definitely missing the networking opportunities and conversations that we get from a physical event. And it's common for audiences online and in person to be a bit shy. So make sure you reassure them that's okay to get involved. Encourage your audience to participate with comments, questions, and other activities. You can put them into breakout rooms to chat. You could ask them a poll, get them to solve a problem, get them up to do star jumps or do some virtual karaoke. Everyone loves karaoke. It's great. Plenty of options. So make sure you think about all these possibilities when you're planning your event. You still need to proactively promote your event. Even though it's going to be listed in the History Festival program, for those that have participated in the History Festival for many years, know it's going to be competing with hundreds of others. So marketing is really important. Ask your speakers and your supporters to share your event online and on their social media platforms. Social media is great because you can include other content such as speaker bios or short teaser videos in the lead up to your event. Don't forget to use the History Festival hashtags, or hashtag SA History Fest, or create your own and use those. You can also create really interesting email campaigns and offer discounts for promotion in exchange for attending your event. So it's also really important to highlight the benefits of your online event to get people to attend. So be very clear and straightforward with your communication. And of course, practice, 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 as I just said before. The reliance on technology to host a successful event can be really stressful. So try to remember to be a bit flexible and change things on the fly if you have to, just as you would in a live scenario. Do what you can to get the event back on track, and don't let it derail your momentum. We're all forging a new path together here, and showing yourself and your team some leniency can really, really help in high stress situations. And the golden rule, if in doubt, Google. There are so many websites out there that can help you get your digital event off the ground and running. And they do seem fiddly to set up, and they do take a little bit of time to set up, but once you're up and running, it can definitely be really, really worth it. Liz mentioned in the chat, we'll compile a list of all of our presentations and a few other bits and pieces, and we'll send them out to everyone today as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Britt. That's great. Lots of good information there. So now we will hand over to questions from the audience. So we had a couple of questions come in via email before today. So we'll start with those. And we've also had a couple come in through the Q&A, which is great. Thank you. So if you think of anything else, attendees, please feel free to add it in there. And thank you so much, everybody, for using the chat to share your own thoughts. That's really, really useful to learn from each other as well as from our speakers. So our first question came from Margaret. And I think both of you touched on this a little bit, but would either of you like to expand a little bit on how to make your online events more accessible?
I suppose one thing that we were very cautious of at the SALA festival, particularly with our own events, but also even the resources that we put out, is really simple things like making sure you use a font that is readable and not going beyond, I think, 12-point size, which I think is something that is pretty applicable to such a wide range of events and resources. I know that Steph, one of the girls in the office who put together a number of our video tutorials, was really clear and particular about putting in the closed captions, which I think helped a lot. So yeah, I think it would be at a very base level, those sorts of things, making sure that what you're communicating is really obvious and easy. But I think beyond that, really think about the audiences you want to be in your space. So if you are going to be targeting people who have autism or epilepsy, make sure that if you're going to have a video, there's no bright flashing lights, or if there is, make sure you put a warning on that so no one gets caught off guard. So I suppose just little things like that, and then really thinking about who in your audience you might have to cater for, and asking your audience can also help you as well.
Definitely ask for help and contact Access to Arts, and especially they're a wonderful company and very friendly, and they'll be able to definitely guide you no matter what level you're at. They'll be able to give you some ideas and some help to make your events more accessible.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question is from Sally. So Sally asked, she'd be interested to hear about the feasibility and logistics of running live virtual tours, perhaps as part of an exhibition or of a historic place, etc. Her association, which is the Oral History Australia, already has experience in running online workshops, and they're fine with meeting platforms and things like that. But they're interested in expanding to other event types. Hence the question about virtual tours. So I think, Christina, you touched a little bit on exhibition tours, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, or any ideas you have for running tours of perhaps historic places or any other sorts of tours, yeah, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the podcasts we did this year was a DIY audio tour. So we had a number of speakers that were speaking about historic statues in the sort of Adelaide CBD, and then we had 2 exhibitions that the tour went to. So it was a person speaking about the statues. They weren't in situ. We then spliced those audio pieces together, and then on our website we had little maps of where you could find each of the stops, and links to things like one of the stops was Nexus Art, so their website, so people could see their opening hours, and also images of all the different stops as well. So that meant that if you could go and walk through the city and see it, you could with your headphones on at your leisure. But also if you couldn't get there for whatever reason, you could listen to it just as a normal podcast, or you could listen to it as a normal podcast while sitting in front of your computer and viewing all those things. So if you're already pretty confident with podcasts and talks in that way, that might be an option for you.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I think I'd only make a comment from a logistic point of view. If you're planning a tour of your building or an exhibition or something like that, I'd definitely have a full run through with all of the technology before you do it, because that way you'll find out very quickly what your barriers are, what things you need to take notice of. Is there lots of extra noise? Do you need to do it when the museum's closed? Do you need to get museum objects out of cases to zoom in and see them? Is the quality of your tablet or your phone or whatever you're using good enough? So definitely have a couple of run-throughs with your speakers and your equipment before you launch, especially if you're doing it live. But even if you're deciding to do a pre-recorded one, it'll just really help you along the way.
Great, thanks, Britt. I'd like to put that question also to all of the attendees. Have you been attending any great on virtual tours during the past few months when things have been going online that you thought have worked really well? Let us know. And as well, also, if you have attended things that haven't worked so well, that will also be useful. Sharon's been sharing her experience in the chat from Harndorf walking tours of some of the virtual tours that she's been running, which is fantastic. Thanks, Sharon. But yes, if you've got any other experiences, perhaps something you've run yourself, or if you've attended, that would be great. So we have a few more questions in the Q&A, one of which links nicely. It's related to the previous question. So Lainey's asked, do you have any tips to avoid pitfalls when it comes to incorporating a digital presence for an already in-person event, such as live streaming? So some of your comments before are quite relevant to that, but do you have anything to add about more of a hybrid model with a little bit of online and a little bit of in-person?
I think we can talk a little bit about that. For the last couple of years, we've live streamed the History Festival program release. So I know, and we've only done that with Facebook Live. We had a tripod and a mobile phone, and that's all we did with that. We had to make sure that we had enough battery on the phone, that we had a backup just in case. We had to make sure, the main thing if you're just live streaming event is get front and center. You have to put a seat aside so someone can sit there with the phone right in front of your speaker so they've got the best view. And then with a live Facebook stream, people often comment or like or ask questions and things as well. So to have someone keeping an eye on that and respond on social media is also really helpful. And yeah, there's probably lots of different ways you can do it. I mean, really, it's just a physical event with you know, someone recording it as well. You can, if you've got the budget, you could hire a professional videographer, or yeah, someone with a camera and a phone will work just as well. And then there's also the beauty of editing as well. With our Talking History lectures in person, we actually always record the sound, so we put out an audio recording as well, but we often edit out some of the introduction bits and some of the Q&A bits if they're not relevant for the recording. So you've also got that option of editing too.
Great, thanks, Britt.
Yeah, I think that those are really beautiful points. For SALA, it's been so different because a lot of the exhibitions are slightly more passive. It's a long, extended, slow burn event rather than getting everybody in one place at one time. So I suppose the difference would be, you know, if you're going to have speakers, then like Brett said, getting nice and close, making sure that everything is understandable, and then really making sure that you have tested or are ready to troubleshoot those Facebook Live connections, etc., if there's the need for that. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Sharon. So Sharon's asked a couple of questions. The first one is, how do you add captioning to your Zoom presentation?
I'm not sure if there's a live option for that or not. One way to get around that is to hire potentially an Auslan interpreter, and just like we are sitting here, have someone signing in the corner. The other option, and what we'll be exploring, will be to add captions to the presentations afterwards when we upload them to our YouTube channel, because there's lots of different versions you can do from that. Deaf Can Do is another fantastic organisation that can help you with creating videos with Auslan interpretation and other different things. We've worked with them for the Centre of Democracy's Stitch and Resist project, and they've actually created some videos for us with their people actually signing, so that will be really good as well. So there are a few other different options that you can look at, but probably the easiest would be to add the captions afterwards if you're going to put it up. But again, access starts. Jodie should be able to talk more about that kind of thing.
I believe you can add closed captioning to live presentations. I've seen it before. It's not always super accurate though. And I had a look before this session today, and I'm sorry to say I couldn't find it, but if we do work out how to do that, we'll share that with everybody afterwards. And if anybody knows, feel free to add to the chat.
Yeah, definitely check, because some videos or some platforms will do automatic generation of captions. Facebook does one of those as well. But yeah, you really need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, because some of the, just like the TV captions, are really not accurate. So you can actually physically change them. So it's definitely worth checking.
Okay, we have a question from Schools Program. I'm not sure what their name is. Schools Program it is. And they say, do you have any other tips for counteracting Zoom fatigue? For instance, if you've already committed to a 2-hour session, how to keep people engaged for the last bit of it?
I think like really planning it out, communicating that to your audience, and then if you know that, okay, it's definitely going to be 2 hours, we know in the third quarter we're going to have people lagging, put something in there that is going to reinvigorate them. So it might be a team building exercise where, you know, everybody has to come up with 5 things they can see, 5 things they can hear, and 5 things they can like touch on their desk. Just like little activities like that will stop people from drifting off and not being engaged, to coming back and being like, oh, I have to do something now, I have to think, I have to pay attention. So I suppose that would be my suggestion. And also think about the texture of your Zoom call, which is a really weird word to use, but like if you think of talking heads as one texture, a presentation with some images as being another texture, and then something they have to do as a third texture, then that might be a way of making it a bit more engaging.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially if you've got a longer event. Give people an interval, toilet break, that kind of thing. Do like 5 minutes in the middle of the presentation. Just gives people a chance to go and stretch. I've participated in events before where they've had a yoga professional come on and do some desks, office sit down stretches. So that can be really helpful as well. Everyone loves pet. Get everyone to share their pets. Have a pet break. Sometimes they just appear, which is great. So yeah, it can be absolutely anything, and your audience will really appreciate if they get a bit of a break to stretch and walk around and whatever else. So
great, thank you. We have one more question. This one comes from Sharon again, and she says, I'd like to know more about having a video running that I have put together, being able to do a Q&A like you're doing at the moment in the background.
Yep, so maybe Sharon, that would be like you would already pre-record your question, and then you just share your screen with everyone, set the video going, and then you can interact and engage with people as the presentation is running. That's one way you can do that. And I think you had another question as well about recording a video and worrying about the content being online for free. So there are ways you can get around it. Like you're already doing, you can just be a special one-off event, which sometimes will encourage more people to attend on the night or the day. The other option is you can actually share that link for a certain period of time, depending on where you host it. So the link might only be available for 24 or 48 hours after the event, and you can just send that just to the people that participated or on request. So that's another way you can potentially get around it. So yeah, maybe have a think about those kinds of options. We had a Talking History earlier this year, that was part of Science Week, and that was the screening of a film. And so many people contacted us and say, oh, I'd love to see that again, or I can't attend on the night, can you send it through? But the filmmakers at that point preferred not to share it publicly, different reasons, but they're definitely going to, because of the interest, they're going to run another screening. So maybe running the event a couple of times, giving people those options.
Great. Well, that's about it for today. Thank you so much again, Christina and Britt. It was really lovely to have Christina from our sister festival come along and share with us today. We have a lot in common, so it's really great to connect with you guys. And thank you, Britt, for sharing your expertise as well. If there's anything else you'd like to ask us, our presenters, and you didn't get the chance today, just send an email through and we'll see if we can answer it offline. I'll just give a quick plug to our upcoming sessions as part of this series. So the next one is on Wednesday, the 4th of November. As Britt has mentioned a couple of times, we'll be joined by Jodie Holdback from Access to Arts, and she'll speak about creating accessible and inclusive events, both in person and online. Following that, we have set a new date for our COVID-19 info session with the History Trust, WHS and HR Manager Amber. So the new date for that one is Wednesday the 18th of November. And we'll send out a booking link for that one shortly. So if you were booked into our original date for that, hopefully you'll be able to rebook and join us on the 18th of November. So that's about it. Thank you so much again for everyone who came along and for participating in the chat and the question and answers. And thanks again, Christina, Britt and Liz for your help. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.